Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geeks Camp, the home of RPG goodness and general tomfoolery. My name is Zach, and I am joined by a special guest, someone I met at a local show here in Kansas City. John Murray, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Zach? Good to see you again.
Good to see you, man. It's been a little while since we were at Meeple-a-thon, I think, together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You had a Meeple-a-thon, for people that don't know, is it's here in Kansas City. It's a smaller show, a few hundred people, and how they kind of had arranged it this year is that all of the RPG vendors were in the RPG room where all the games were going on. And I didn't know who was going to be there. I think there's about 4 or 5 of us in that space. But I saw John over setting up with some cool RPG books, and I didn't know you. I didn't know I knew one of the books that was on your table, but I didn't know all of them. And so it kind of piqued my interest. And over a 3-day weekend, you have a lot of time to kill at a smaller con, and so we ended up chatting. And I said I got to get John on the show and chat with him about some of his stuff. So thanks for climbing aboard.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So I know a bit about you, but for folks listening, folks at home, what is John about? Tell us about what you are and what you got going on.
All right. My name is John. I'm the founder of Biscuit Tin RPG. Meeple-a-thon was actually my first convention that I went to ever. So I was testing the waters to see if it was something that would work for me. And it turns out it was a ton of fun getting to run a few games and setting up my wares there. As for what I do, I create, at this current time, I focused mostly on 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons content. Mm-hmm. So we have a few things out now, actually over 25 titles, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
That are strictly Biscuit Tin RPG, but I've also done freelance writing for Storyteller's Forge. I actually got to write and put in some stuff for their newest release, The Black Ballad, which is on the printers right now, if I'm not mistaken, and coming out to backers. And then we'll actually have some for the next convention that I go to. So I'll have some of those on hand too. Other than that, the main thing that I do is whenever I build something for any game system, I'm role play mechanics. I absolutely love inventing new mechanics that help accelerate or entice role play. One of the things that I'm known most for is curses. Because you get the standard curses in D&D. Oh, I've got the Berserker Axe and I have to attack my friend. All right, cool. But they're not very fun. So what we did was we spiced it up a little bit. We added curses that have like real actual role play implications. Like your personality might change slightly. You get to really have fun with new stuff. We also created. I was there actually because we just published our first major book, which was the First Gate, a Menagerie of Madness, which is one part. The first chapter is all about First Gate. Incidentally, I don't partake of Wizards of the Coast like mainstream stuff, so I don't know a lot about their stuff. I don't know hardly anything about Forgotten Realms. I don't know about the other places or Planescape, any of it.
Right.
I inadvertently created an analog or a slightly altered version of Sigil and had no idea I was doing it until after someone said, "Hey, that sounds like Sigil," and I was like, "What's that?"
That's awesome.
But we created this whole new world that exists in the void, and then that's just the first chapter. Just bare bones, here's a world you get to play with that you can put into any system. It in itself is system agnostic. You want to have fun with this and throw it into like a cyberpunk campaign or something like that, it's got the mechanics in there that are so bare bones that you can put it in anything. Mm-hmm. The rest of the book, however, is 5th edition mechanics, new subclasses, a new class, new feats, species you can play as, just a whole menagerie of things to really add some spice to your game. But yeah, that's basically what I do. I like to build and create fun, innovative things. And if I see something online that I'm like, that looks good, but I think I could tweak it and make it a little more fun, I love doing that too. One of our most recent ones would be Curses Revisited, where we created one spell that has 18 different parts and basically is a new bestow curse. And then Blood Magic was one that I got into for like a solid week, and I just pumped out like a whole bunch of stuff. Brand new core class, 3 subclasses, and then made a wizard subclass for fun.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What got you in from being a fan of role-playing games into becoming a creator? What was that? What did that look like?
It's strangely enough what led me to Storytellers Forge and my friendship with Rick Hines. He was working on a project called the Red Opera, and I had just started dipping my toe back into Dungeons and Dragons with 5th edition, and just kind of like, this is fun. I really enjoy it because I hadn't played in like 5-10 years.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, let's try the new edition. And then the Red Opera comes out. It scrolls past my feed like 9 times, and eventually I'm like, all right, fine, I'm going to read about it at least. And then I read about it, and I was like, I'm backing this immediately. It's an entire campaign about warlocks and the choices they make and how it can absolutely shatter an entire world. That's the bare bones of it. It's such a fun campaign. I've run it twice, and every time I get cursed at, and people give me virtual hugs at the same time. So I'm happy about it. But Rick Hines and Pat Edwards were the 2 major writers on it. I got involved with that because I really enjoyed the content, the concept, and I got to know both Rick and Pat, mostly Rick at first, but Pat definitely came after that and hit it off like gangbusters. It's fantastic. But through that process, when they were going through it, I was just tinkering with the idea of like, there's so many different warlocks out there. Why aren't there more options? So I started tinkering with new warlock options. And I was like, what about this goofy thing? And then what it came from was this weird creation that I kind of combined Gordon Ramsay with, I don't know, like the eccentricities of The Mask, the Jim Carrey film, right? And just combined them into one creature and said, that's a patron. And I built from there. So it's this chef-inspired, like not really inherently evil, but not a good guy either sort of patron. And I was like, here's what you can get with that. And that started it. The first subclass that I made was Broken. Horrible, and it's somewhere still around, but it'll never see the light of day again if I can help it. But from that process, I learned the ins and outs of how to balance a subclass, and my interest in creating things for 5th edition, which is really fun and easy to use for people that are either just starting D&D or wanting to dip their toe back in after a long hiatus. It's really user friendly. It's really fun to learn. But when they cut out a lot of the stuff that, made 3.5 and 3.0 really unbearable, all that crunch, they took out a lot of really fun options as well. So one of the things that I wanted to do was, in minor ways, just add new options that kind of not necessarily bring back all of the crunch, but like, hey, here's a thing that we all forgot about. How's this look? And people are like, oh, that's actually really interesting. So it's just a fun concept. I really got into it, and I've been doing it ever since. And that was back in probably 2020.
2020? Yeah. Makes sense there. Storytellers Forge is really interesting. And, I think we've talked to Rick. I don't know if we talked to Rick on the show or not, but Rick is a great guy. And it's an interesting story that they have as a group. It's cool that you kind of came into it through the Red Opera, and then the Black Ballad is their next release. That's weird and wild in its own way. And so it's cool that like you start out as a fan, and I think that's typically how we do it, whether we're a fan of Wizards of the Coast or we're a fan of a third party or whatever it is. But we start out as a fan and seeing how others create, or we want to add our own contributions to what's out there. And to me, I mean, if I was Rick and Storytellers Forge, hearing that people like you and you're not the only one, I'm sure, are inspired by what they're creating to add your own ideas into the mix is very, very cool. So you started designing, you got some pieces together. You kind of learned the arts and crafts of putting together mechanics for 5e. You reached out to Rick, you started designing things there. What took you from hey, I want to contribute to other things, or I want to design my own things too. I want to make my own book. Was that just in your mind? Is that just a natural progression, or was there an inciting event between I want to create and I want to publish, if that makes sense?
Yes. So honestly, I stumbled into it. It wasn't my first goal. My goal when I started creating things was never to become hyper famous, like people at Critical Role or any of the other well-known things like Dimension 20. I never wanted to be
Yeah.
the guy, right? I just wanted to create fun stuff. And through that, I actually, when I was getting to know Rick and them, I actually got to know the blog editor for the studio formerly known as Apotheosis Studios before the fire broke out there. I met there. I became friends with the blog editor that they had, Adam Ray, and
Okay.
we actually started working on some content together. I said, "Hey, Adam, I'm coming up with this weird compendium idea. Would you like to help?" And Adam was like, absolutely. I've seen what you do. I'm really excited. I'd love to do this. And so Adam is really responsible for a major portion of First Gate and its just inception, because it was really a random idea that floated through my head. And I was like, oh, what if we just had a city of doors in the middle of nowhere that like you could get lost in, but it can go to anywhere and everywhere. You're just not sure where until you step through that door. And Adam said, I can work with this. Don't just make it a little lore drop. Just give me this and give me 3 weeks. 3 weeks later, Adam comes back to me with this fully laid out like script. And I was like, what have you done with this? And Adam went, everything. So we took that and we said, this works really well with the other stuff that I've been designing on the side, which is more mechanics based, because it's a place that all of these things could feasibly exist.
Right.
And we just went with that. And one of the things we wanted to do, because we both have a very odd sense of humor, maybe me a little bit more than most, after creating something called the Infernal Chef, or as I, in homage to Eddie Izzard, called him Jeff, patron of biscuits.
Nice.
What we do in this book is, while we have all this stuff laid out, we kind of took a cue from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And in the background, there's these conversations that are going on just on the side of the page. No real relation always necessarily to what you're seeing on the page. But it's just a conversation between these two entities, one being Jeff and the other one being this unknown quantity known as Adrian Five Quills. One is very chaos oriented and the other one's very order oriented, law. And it's just banter back and forth about how one is always telling the other one to knock it off because they're being two themselves. So we did that. We ran with that all the way through. But as we started adding more and more, I was like, holy crap, we've got a book's worth of stuff. I was originally only going to release like a small compendium, maybe put it through Drive-Thru RPG, print it out, or make it print on demand. Absolutely. Maybe that'd work. But it ended up becoming like 3 times the size of the first thing that I ever published through there. And we it was a labor of love. 2.5 years from inception to actually putting it together. Mostly because I had to learn how to use Affinity Publisher.
Yeah, I think we conversed about that at the show about like, as someone who starts out as a writer and as a game designer, and you're picking up skill sets there. Well, inadvertently, once you step into the world of publishing or selling your things, you also have to start picking up all these other skill sets. At least at the beginning, you have to start assimilating, because if you don't, if you're starting out and you have to pay for an editor and a layout person and all of the art and all of the blah, 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 all of a sudden you look up and you will never make, not only will you not break even, you won't make money, you will probably be massively in the hole. And so, there's this world of this early stage of what can I learn to do to kind of, tip the scale into my favor. I enjoyed flipping through your book, and as you were talking to me about that, because it reminded me a lot of early books that I put together and the experience that I had, which I think you and I don't have. unique experiences in that way. I think that's the shared experience of a lot of 5e creators is that sort of a thing. One of the cool things about 5e is that anybody could make it, right? But one of the downsides of 5e is that they basically give you a document and say, go figure it out, right? There's other games out there, or other systems that'll say, here's some art assets, or here's a template, or here's a whatever. And with 5e, you kind of are on your own until you find that community, like Storytellers Forge or something like that. Okay, so you're working with Adam, and you're creating these cool things, and you're collaborating with Storytellers Forge. You said earlier that you're not super invested into Forgotten Realms or like the lore or the settings there, especially Wizard of the Coast products. What sort of inspirations, either in the RPG space or outside the RPG space, do you find yourself drawn to when you're thinking about First Gate and the setting and just the ideas in general that you put together?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I pull from my two main sources are this. One, I'm an avid fan of the Dresden Files, the book series by Jim Butcher. I have been inspired by so many of the interesting things that happen in those books that I'm like, I really want to make something similar to this, but like with my own twist. Other things, when it comes to how dark and gritty some of the mechanics can get, specifically with like soul magic and things like that, I really take a cue from how dark and very grim like World of Darkness is. I haven't played Vampire in probably 8, maybe 12 years now, but everything I remember about it was both absolutely enthralling, very story driven, and if there was nothing else you learned, if you make a mistake, it punishes you. And I want to add that level of detail to the things that I create. So whenever I make a mechanic, I want to make sure that there's an actual use for it, not just a throwaway thing where you can absolutely use it or not. That's always going to be the case. But if you use it, I want it to be so well done and well documented that you can twist it just a little bit and make it fit into your campaign. You can give a really cool idea to your player, be like, hey, here's something I know about. Maybe you would have fun with this. There are downsides, but there's obviously an upside as well. So really just anything fantasy oriented, I love it. Plus, I've been playing a lot of Cyberpunk, or at least I was for a while. So some of the stuff was inspired by that. I was like, hey, it doesn't matter. It's D&D.
Yeah. I love that triangle of inspiration: Dresden, Cyberpunk, and World of Darkness. I think that very much comes through in what you've put together. And I think that the other cool thing is, I think the fact that you have a background in Vampire and World of Darkness stuff, I think that it makes a lot of sense to me why you were drawn to Red Opera Black Ballad as a contributor and as somebody that was really inspired by that. Because I think in many ways, Storytellers Forge, what they're doing is they're trying to find ways of getting that immersive quality, that role play, that narrative, that world building aspect that is such a cornerstone of White Wolf's domain. And they're saying, is there a way that we can do this, kind of bring some of that aesthetic and some of that mood and certainly a heavy amount of that narrative oomph into 5th edition. And as someone who adores what they do as well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And really, we need, as an RPG community, there's a reason that Vampire took off in the 90s so fast. And there's a reason that it's stayed vibrant by and large all through these eras, is because it's not always is it perfect, and not always is it the path that you want to take, but it so much knows what it wants to be, or what it's looking at, and it communicates its world and its ideas so clearly. I think that when you get into it, you immediately feel like this is a space that will be as deep as I want to wade in. Like it's not a shallow experience. You're not going to get to the end of it really ever for most people. There's always something new to explore. And there's also like always something to draw on as a game master and as a player to, wrap yourselves around the story and the world a little bit more. So anyhow, I really like that. And I think that's cool. I think very much, having read some of your stuff, I think that those 3 touch points, definitely the fun of the Dresden Files radiates through. And I think I would say maybe some of the attitude of Cyberpunk is really what courses more than anything. But yeah, very, very, very cool. So let's see. We talked a little bit about that side of it. What you brought up though early on that Meeple-a-thon was your first show, and before we hopped on the chat here, we talked about you're going to several shows in the next month. Obviously, that's a big part of it. On my end, I'm arguably obsessed with conventioneering and the convention experience. This is your first going to Meeple-a-thon was your first, but like, what drew you to dipping your toe into that, and what did you find? You talked about running games for people, but what do you think latched itself onto you to the point where I think you said you're doing like 3 or 4 shows in the next month? So
yeah. So I was very unfamiliar with the convention scene. And Rick Hines pointed out to me, he's like, if you really want people to get to know you and get to know your product and, actually be invested and interested, you got to get out there and meet the people that play these games. And he said, if there's nothing else, even if you can't make it to every single convention, get a few of them to get started. And that way you get your name out there and people will go, hey, I know that guy. Hey, I know this work. I know who does this. That dude's pretty cool, or he's a little weird, but acceptable.
Yeah.
But one of the things I wanted to do was I really wanted to showcase what can be done in the book that we created, and show people, my DM style, among other things. So when I first found out about Meeple-a-thon, it was a last minute thing. I said, oh my goodness, are you guys out of space? And they're like, no, we have 1 spot left and you can absolutely have it. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And because I was running a game and it's a charity event, thankfully it was slightly discounted because I did not have near the funds needed to even begin to set up that process.
Sure.
So I got a table, I ran a couple of games, and both games, everyone had a blast. From the first time I ran First Gate for an in-person crew at Meeple-a-thon, we had the players, because you're walking into a world that isn't fantasy-based. It's got a combination of fantasy and sci-fi to it. So when someone walks into the First Gate, one of the guys really went with the role play and went, I don't think I'm ever going to be the same. And that line stuck with me. And I was like, that is what I want to give to people. I want them to come to a table, have that experience, and go, I'm different.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's a good different, but they're different. But yeah, so going there and learning about that, and learning about how the conventions work and everything along those lines, gave me a whole new perspective on how the entire thing works. Because it's one thing to be able to sell your stuff online. You can shout on TikTok or throw things out on Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter, and any other platform you want, but you're not going to get the same level of engagement as you are when you actually sit there and have a conversation with someone and get to tell them about what you're doing. And I'm so happy that Rick said, do the thing. So I did the thing. And I'm really excited for the next ones I've got coming up here next month, including one out of state, which I never thought I'd do this early on, but I was like, I got the option to. So I'm going to Storytellers Forge in Indianapolis. So that's going to be fun.
Indie PopCon, I think, is what you said it is. And
yep.
Yeah, that's cool. It's on my radar, but I haven't picked it up. And then we're going to be at a similar show together in April called Midwest Game Fest, which is here in Kansas City. I think it's one of the bigger ones in Kansas City. You should check it out, by the way, if you haven't yet. Midwest Game Fest. It's awesome. And then I think you said you're going to another small local one here in the region as well. That's very cool. Yeah, I think that, like, to me, that what you said, engagement, like, and developing a connection, like, those are huge pieces of a show. I also think one of the things that I really like about it is it gives you opportunities that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
In the sense of, one of the things that I like to do now at different shows is go run a bunch of games that my home crew probably isn't going to get to for a while,
Hmm.
or go play test something that you've put together, but again, you just want to put in front of more people. There's like a lot of opportunities there that I really latch onto. Like, we just got back from a show in February, and I think I ran 4 different systems and played in 3 new ones. And like that experience of, like, in 4 days playing 7 different games, is like, I find an extreme value to that. And I find that most people that go to, believe it or not, most people that go to, like, board game or tabletop game conventions are pretty cool people by and
Hmm.
large.
Yeah.
They're reasonable people. And I find that, you know, 19 games out of 20, I have a great time. And I always leave a con feeling like there's an energy that I got to take away from it, even if it meant being there 10 hours a day or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's just cool that way. So I'm excited when anytime somebody says, I went to a con, I had a great time, and I'm going to more. Like, that's like, yeah, okay, we're getting similar things out of it, and
Yes.
it's doing its job. Yeah. What do you think are we talked about layout a little bit as a challenge that you had to, like, sort through and navigate. But what do you think are the most challenging pieces, 1 or 2 things, of being in this side of the industry as a game designer?
Oh, oh man. First, understanding what that even means.
Mm-hmm.
That is challenge number one. I know I want to create stuff. How am I going to distribute it? How am I going to potentially get it in a physical format with the least amount of struggles? So that's obviously I went with Drive Through RPG. Yes, they
Yeah.
take a cut out of the top, but
Yeah.
it saves me a ton of headache.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about shipping. I don't have to worry about all this. It's like it's all taken care of on their back end because they take care of that. That's where that percent comes out.
Right.
But oh man, one, you got to learn the system that you're building for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to understand the ins and outs, and even if you don't understand everything, because I'm very much a rule of cool storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if it doesn't necessarily match up with the rules, I may just bend them a little bit to make this cool thing happen for you. And I will never apologize for that.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing about it is that I think the hardest and most difficult thing for me was figuring out layout, understanding the typeface, and making sure that everything was not necessarily symmetrical, but worked on the page
Right.
well
Right.
while not making it oversized. Like, obviously, when I made the first gate, I didn't truly understand what the font size was until I got the first, like,
Right.
proof of it. And I was like, man, you don't need glasses for this book. It's okie dokie. And I'm not mad about it. I mean, I would redo it if I redid it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'll obviously shrink the text down a little bit. But I mean, it works for what it was. It's a whole learning experience. Every time you do something in this space, when you're creating things, you're trying to learn a new task, is every time you do it, make sure that you master a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that be, I know the layout now, I know how to make these stat blocks look really good, or now I know how I want to do lists going forward, or the rules and concepts that I have, or just the layout itself. I thankfully stumbled into a really cool layout that was kind of pre-made, and then I modified it a little bit, because making the fancy page colors and the little headers at the bottom and the top would have taken me probably another 3 years, as I am not proficient with any art skills whatsoever. The other thing is, and this has really come up lately, is sourcing your artwork.
Mm-hmm.
For one, unless it's free stuff I'm giving away, I will not touch AI.
Mm-hmm.
I won't, because I can't bring myself to do it, because I don't know if that artwork's been stolen
Right.
or it is more of a piece that was stolen or not. I
Right.
can't prove or disprove that, so I don't want to charge people for that. So for free stuff, absolutely. Here's some free stuff. I'll make something pretty so you can take it and go on with whatever you want. But sourcing your artwork is so difficult unless you know people now, because there's so many. I've run into it everywhere. Even in the Discord servers, there's so many bad actors that jump in from other servers and know people, and it may be a bot or it may just be a scammer that wants to take your money.
Yeah.
And they're using stolen art to say, this is mine, I can do something like this for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up getting screwed over. And unless you make sure you're paying attention and using PayPal or something like that, where you can dispute it,
Mm-hmm.
and say, look, I was promised this and they didn't give it to me, I can tell you that this was obviously stolen,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. It's just an extra layer to navigate through. So one of the things I was really happy with was the fact that I got to know a lot of artists along the way when I was talking to Rick, when the Red Opera was going on. In fact, the cover art for the hard and soft cover for the first gate was actually done by David Granjo, the same guy who did the Red Opera artwork.
Oh, nice. Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Connections are so freaking important when it comes to art.
Yes.
Like, it makes the world so much easier. Like, I think one of the things you said, though, it reminded me of a conversation that I had with another creator, Gav, here on the show. And one of the things he said that has really stuck with me is that, like, RPGs are like this nexus point for all sorts of art, whether that's, illustrations and paintings and drawings and things like that, or it's writing, or it's music, because a lot of things have a music component. I know, like, Red Opera and Black Ballad do in ways. There's, like, obviously there's a theater or a theatrics aspect to it. Like, there's so many nexus points. And I think because of that, I think I recognize now that I don't think that the average book is really a resource book anymore, right? It is that, even if you're designing it. Like, obviously the first gate is a resource book. It's got a whole bunch of monsters and spells and yada yada yada, right? But really what it is, more than that, is it is an art piece as a whole that communicates something about the people that contributed to it. And if you pick it up and you flip through it, you get a taste of who those people are, and how their mind works, or what gets them excited, things like that. And you walk away from that, I think, having, even if you never run that, the experience, the primary experience was already achieved, which was, I experienced a thing of art from a person. And I will walk away with that, with opinions, not just about the product, but about that person, and how what they've contributed or what they've offered up modifies my perception of the wider community or the wider game. I mean, I think that that's a big part of why, what I like doing is buying a bunch of and accumulating a bunch of third-party stuff, because at the end of the day, what I'm learning is it's not just about, I have another subclass for the Warlock, or a new patron for the Warlock or whatever. It's also about, like, this is another, like this is an additive. It's like a museum, and I'm adding an artist to the gallery, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like that games have so many games have opened up their doors to allow for a wide variety of creators, because it makes it more likely, like, that you're going to see more people stepping into this space, and we're going to get more ideas and more atmosphere. So I don't know. It's cool, and I like it a lot. It makes a lot of sense to me, though. I think that, again, you're not alone in talking about the big challenges being layout and art acquisition. The other thing that you said, which I thought was very interesting, is, just learning the game. Because I think the implication there that I read into what you said is, like, there's probably at least two different levels of learning a game, right? There's the level of, I can run/play this and I feel very comfortable with it. And I
Mm-hmm.
can give you a good time, or I can contribute to a good time of the group based off of what we're doing. The other part of it is the second stage, which is you said you're not afraid to bend something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I like about that verbiage is that you're not afraid to bend implies that you have two hands grasping the thing and you are stressing it intentionally. Which is different than breaking, which can happen just because you stumble through something and just snap it by the blunt force of your body's impact, right? You can't. It's harder to bend something by accident in this way, at least in my mind. And I think that it's important. You mentioned early on the first subclass you built, horribly broken. I think that's all of us again. But then you see and you evolve, and I think that learning of there are mechanics, there are through lines underneath all this, and the more I can become a student of that, and I can understand what the through lines of design philosophy is for this game, the more I can choose how do I lean into these design philosophies while also putting my own spin on it, or how do I best convey this new idea in a way that doesn't feel alien to the underlying mechanics of the game that I'm adding to the noise with, right?
Yes.
I don't know. There's just some interesting stuff there, and that's one of my favorite things to think about. Do you when you think about that, like when you think about a subclass, we'll just stick with a warlock for a moment, and we're pretty close to time here, but
Sure.
Noodling around here for a minute. When you think about designing for a subclass now, what is the process of that? Do you start with an idea and then go look at what the skeleton of a subclass looks like, and then kind of build it yourself? Like, what do you do to make sure that you're aligning with what's come before, but also bending it in the right ways?
Yes. So one of the things that I do is I come up with the idea first. I have this concept in my brain. For instance, when I created the Archfey, a new Archfey, I had both the summer and winter court Archfey.
Yeah.
So when I went through that, I was like, I need to make this unique, but I also need to kind of stick in line with maybe the Archfey itself. So I looked at the Archfey because I didn't want to steal or recreate something that's already there. I wanted to make something new and unique. So what I do is I have the idea. I go every single time I build something for a subclass of a major core class in Dungeons and Dragons, I will go back and I will re-look at the entire class as a whole.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to create something that just is its own thing that just happens to be connected.
Right.
Because then it doesn't work well.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool, I'm a warlock that can cook, which is effectively what the first Infernal Chef class was, but with some really weird tweaks that were just not okay. But you look at the bare bones, you look at the full class, and you do this every time. At least I do. Because that way you never forget the other minor things that may get missed when you're just designing the subclass from the ground up. Because if you just look at your previous subclasses and you're like, I did good enough here, I can do something similar, make some tweaks here, and just flavor it for this, it doesn't work. You want to make sure you take the whole thing into account when you're building something. Otherwise, it will come off as slightly alien. You'll be like, well, why would I play this when it doesn't really work well with the core class itself? It seems like it goes off on its own thing.
Yeah.
And there are admittedly some subclasses out there that do that, and it's fine, right? It's just, it's kind of like taking a prestige class in 3.5, right?
Yeah.
Just a brand new thing that you throw on. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, I can do this extra thing. It's tangentially related. That's all I need.
Yeah.
And it's just fun. But when we build, we want it to like really sync with the original.
Yep.
And we don't want it to be built with or without power gamers in mind, right?
Yeah.
Because I build to incentivize role play, not incentivize, I want to be the biggest, baddest guy at the table or gal. There's power gamers of all stripes.
Yeah.
But I don't build for that. I build so that you'll have a fantastic time playing this. It doesn't matter if you die, get brought back, die again, get brought back as a skeleton, die again, then finally get brought back. You're still going to have fun playing this creation. And that's what I build for. I want to make sure that it meshes up nicely and that it's fun to play on top of it, because that's what Biscuit Tin RPG is all about.
I love that. Yeah, one of the lucky breaks I had early on was actually in the first published book is my brother-in-law built that with me, Micah, and he is a power gamer, and I think the best kind of power gamer. But one of the things he helped me learn a whole language that they use, or I should say he uses a language that I interpret now to mean all of that. But one of the things he talked about was like he's looking at a class and he's like, oh, this is a ribbon ability, this is a blah blah blah, like different ideas about like, hey, this is a thing that this is an ability that's here, and it's kind of it's here and it does something, but it doesn't really do anything that affects power or balance or anything like that. It's just something that is here so that you have something here. And if you look at a warlock or something, I think early on in the warlock subclasses, like there's a level where, and certainly it's true with sorcerer, where you get a ribbon ability and a standard ability in the same at the same level. And the idea there being but it's important to recognize that that's how it's done, because then when you go back and look at it and you're designing your own, you say, okay, the standard warlock subclass build says that you get one ability that's basically for flavor, and you get one ability that is basically about empowering your combat in a unique way at first level, typically around cantrips or whatever. Again, if you're a sorcerer. And and so once you understand that those are the principles, that really dynamically changes how you approach that subclass, because now you're walking in and saying, I have this great idea for an infernal chef. And what is a flavor ability going to be at a low level? What is something I can do for an infernal chef at first level as a sorcerer? I know it's not a sorcerer, but that will optimize my cantrip casting or give me a unique flavor that carries through with that. And if you choose to break that, again, or bend it, that you know what you're doing there. Anyhow, I love that work through it, and I love the note of knowing what the full class is, because like you said, you don't want to build something that's alien. You also, like, sometimes you can get inspired by, oh, there's this interesting 7th level class ability that doesn't really get utilized by subclasses at all, but I have an idea for how it could be optimized. And now all of a sudden you are communicating a better understanding of the class, because you're saying, I am inspired by core class elements, not just my own ideas for what this can look like. So yeah, I love that as an idea. Definitely if folks are listening, like, what a great, like really getting into the weeds of it, but I really like this discussion. All right. So, as we're getting close to the end here, John, tell me, we've talked about your product being on DriveThru RPG. Talk to us though about where is DriveThru the main place that you can find your stuff, and how is the best way? Just looking for Biscuit Tin RPG on DriveThru, or what's the best way to do this?
So, that would have been the best place, or going to my Ko-fi. But recently, I put down a little scratch to kind of get my influence up a little bit, and now I own BiscuitTinRPG.com.
Nice.
And on there, it has links to everything from my socials to DriveThru RPG and my Ko-fi. Most of my stuff will always end up on Ko-fi, because I'll have a digital version of everything, with the exception of a deck of cards that I'm making currently. But everything's going to be available there. I put this caveat on the website, and I put it out here now. Anything on Ko-fi is going to be about up to 30% cheaper digital-wise than on DriveThru RPG, so always keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Gotta offset some of the stuff there. But if you're hardcore DriveThru RPG, just look me up, Biscuit Tin RPG. You'll notice the Ouroboros with the chef knives and a chef hat in the middle of it.
Nice.
Then you found me.
Perfect. And if somebody's like, okay, I want to check out John's stuff, I want to check out Biscuit Tin stuff, like, is the first gate the thing that you would point them to be like, this is your first, just dive in here?
If if you want to look at the stuff and see what we've created from the very beginning, the best place to do it would actually be a book that was available at the same time and came out first, and that is the Compendium of the Absurd.
Mhm.
It's actually out in its second version, which is Redux. Basically, what happened when I created the first one was I made an oopsie and forgot that Artificer wasn't
Mhm.
part of the standard
I
OGL,
feel
so I
that.
had to quickly pull that down before anyone noticed and redo it. But doing so, I added in some new stuff. But it's got everything from mechanics to playable. Actually, I don't think this one has any subspecies, but it's got a lot of the new spells, lores, variants, things that you can do with it. But if you're looking for the quintessential Biscuit Tin RPG, at the current moment, it is absolutely going to be the first gate. That's got literally a little bit of everything. Actually, a lot of it, if I'm being honest.
Perfect. Fantastic. All right, last question. So they know where to go and get your stuff. Is there different social platforms that you like interacting on and things they could go connect with you?
So, I used to be really, really on Twitter,
Hmm.
but the algorithm just doesn't work anymore. So most of my stuff that I get posted out there, like I use Twitter to like occasionally post like, "Hey, we have a game tonight," or "It's been postponed," if I even use it at all. But 9 times out of 10, I'm on Instagram and TikTok.
Hmm.
TikTok is where most of the original stuff comes from, and then it gets sourced out to the other places. TikTok is where I'm most likely to respond. So if you have that, cool. If you don't, Instagram's also a good backup to find me, and they're at Biscuit Tin RPG on both of them.
Perfect. And I'll try to include a chunk of those down in the show notes so people can check you out there. John, thanks so much for hanging out with me for the afternoon, and I've really enjoyed our chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Zach.
All right, everybody else, thanks a lot for tuning in. I appreciate you guys, and until next week, we'll see you next time.